Hi everyone, and welcome back to the next lesson of our Java course. So in this lesson, I'm going to focus on Java comments. This is one of the topic in Java which we normally don't talk and we don't pay a lot of attention to it. But this is really a powerful tool for a programmer, not only for other programmers but for you as well. All right. So on a simple term, Java comments are nothing but a sticky note for your code, right? You sometimes put different type of a sticky note so that you understand why, what are the relevance for this one, why I did that. So similarly, for your code, these are some sort of a sticky notes. They will not make any impact or they don't affect how the program runs or how the compiler compiles your program, but they are super helpful to explain what's happening in your code. Okay. And you might heard some argument saying this is actually good for a very large team, but no, that's not the case. Even if you are working as alone, if you are working on a smaller team, it doesn't matter. Comments make your code easier to read and understand. Not only yours, but if someone else has written their code, it's hold true for them, right? Because we at the end of the day, I cannot peek inside your mind and find out, okay, what you were thinking when you have written this code. But if you have added a comments, those notes, I will at least able to get the context. What was the reasoning, why you took this approach, why this logic, why this calculations, right? Otherwise it's just a guesswork for someone else, or they will keep on coming to you saying, hey, why you did that, why not like this, why not like that, right? So on a high level, there are three types of comments that we can add into a Java program. Okay. So number one is a single line comments. All right. Then we have a multi-line comments, and the last one is comments for the documentation. So the single line comments, as I said, as the name suggests, right? It's basically you are writing a single line as a comment. So what you have to do is, for a single line comment, you basically add these two slashes and then say, okay, this is a hello world. That's all. This is a single line. Okay, which means if you basically try to write on the next lines for compiler, that's something different. So now with the comments, what's happen is when you compile this program, so compiler will go here, try to check what is that, is it matching with everything. When it reaches this line, it say, hey, this is a comment. It's not gonna do anything. It's not gonna process this one. It will keep this section as is. All right. And then you can have, so this is one thing where I'm just writing this on a print one. I can have something else where I can probably add a comments on a individual statements. For example, if I do this one, you see here, I'm saying length of the rectangle, then a width of the rectangle, and then I'm also saying what this thing is doing. So if you see here, right, it's one of the benefit I can see is it's crystal clear, not for you, but for someone else reading your code, what is doing. Even for you, let's say you have written some complicated logic, and then after 1 month you are revisiting your code. Most of us don't we are not able to recall what was the context at that time, why I written that code. But if you have added the comments, it will make your life easier, and it will make your life easier for someone else who is gonna work on your code. All right. So that is number one. So number two is your multi-line code. Okay. So the multi-line code is basically, let's say you want to add a little bit more explanation that, okay, what this program is going to do. So in that case, instead of relying on to those single line of a code, you can rely on to the multi-line code. So for multi-line code, you basically add slash and then star. So anything that is written between these two lines is actually treated as a multi-line code. Okay, so let's take one example here. All right, so I have rewritten the previous example. I have taken out those single line comments and I have converted into the multi-line comments, right? So multi-line comments, the basic difference between a single line comment and a multi-line comment is, single line comment is something where you just want to add a quick notes. Multi-line comments you're gonna use where you want to add a more detailed explanation. All right, basically to explain why this is happening, what is the overall logic it's going to do. If you see, I'm basically explaining all of these things, saying this program calculates a rectangle, and I'm defining a length, width, and multiplying by it. All right, so this kind of explain what is where you're gonna use the single line code and where you're gonna use the multi-line codes. All right, now the third one, it's a bit special, and we call it as a documentation comments. The reason why we call it as a documentation comment is because it's used to generate the documentation. So for example, if you are doing some work outside of your program, you normally document it, right? You basically write it down, what I'm doing, what is going to make those impacts. Similar to your program, you can also generate the document for your program, which means it's gonna generate some sort of HTML component which gonna explain what your methods or what your class is supposed to do, and those things can be used by other programmers or by another anyone else who is using your code or a program. All right, and these are actually helpful when you basically write the especially onto when you are working on a larger team or you are working on some open source project. All right, so let's take example. So there is a little bit difference about these documentation comment and a multi-line one. Okay, all right, so this is my documentation comment. So the one of the differences, you see, it start with a single star, it start with a double star. All right, and then if you are using some sort of IDs, they will also kind of highlight you based upon some of the color coding. So this is a documentation, so you see this is being a different color schema is being used, and this was simply a comment. All right, so another difference between comments and a documentation comment is normally comments are for internal use, which means for you as well as for the other teams who have the access to your source code or who can check those things. Documentations are mostly for a larger teams or a team who probably don't have access to the source code, but you have given them some sort of APIs or things to work on. So they will go to the documentation, understand it, what it is supposed to get. So it's defining, basically this is telling this function is supposed to take, or method is supposed to take, two parameters. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about the methods, how you can call these methods, but it's telling me that it's taking a first number, a second number, and it's basically returning the sum of a plus b. Okay, and once you start learning it, you will see the documentation on everywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one example quickly. So if you go to, let's say, Javadocs, right, which is basically from Oracle itself, right? You see all these documentations are generated sort of these kind of things. All right, so this is an example of the documentation. So these are the different things which is available in the JDK. You don't have to go into details. I'm gonna search one thing which is string. This is one of the class in Java. Okay, so you see all these things which says what it does. It also explaining you something about string, but is it supposed, so it's kind of a complete documentation for this class. It's also gonna explain you what are the different constructors, don't worry, different methods, what are they supposed to do, and all sort of things, right? So there is no magic around it. Everything is being generated out of the these comments, right? The documentation comment, and I can show you how this thing will look like. So I'm going to open the string class in our editor, and then you will get to know what it means. Okay, so this is the string class in our Java. So this is out of the box class which is provided by the JDK. But if you see here, there's a lot of comments that has been added, and these are the documentation comments. Okay, you see here, these are all documentation comments. Okay, if I scroll down, these are again the documentation comments. Okay, I'm just expanding it so you should be clear, right? Double star and then star. All right, so based upon this one, what you have seen, what I showed you earlier, everything is generated from these documentation. So you don't have to get into this class, but you just go to that specific page and will able to get everything, saying, okay, what this class is supposed to do, what this method is supposed to do, and all sort of things. All right, now so now we understand what Java comments are, and they are actually powerful. But there are few things, do's and don'ts, which we should be aware of it, right? We should not overdo the things, or we should not underdo the things. Number one and these are not the rules, as I said. Compiler is not gonna force you any rules on it. These are just some sort of conventions and few things which people have learned over the time. Number one is your documentation should be able to explain why, the why part, right? For example, if your some part of your code is doing some tricky calculation, I'm just saying, okay, this is doing some addition, let's say it's a tricky addition, right? Then your comment should be able to explain how you're solving that tricky problem, okay? Or it should be able to answer the question why I have written this code in such a way, why not I have used a different approach, right? Number two, we should be able to highlight what are some of the critical logic. If there is some critical business logic you are using just to kind of do those calculations, you should add that as part of the comment. You should not basically add a lot of details, but it should focus on number one, why. Number two is if there is any logic around it. So business logic or any business driven calculation. So we should be able to add those ones. So if someone else is reading your code, they have the context, they know why you are doing it, what was the business need. So don't have to go from one place to another to understand. All right. So, and again, as I said, we don't have to overdo it. We should basically think what do we want to add and then add those things. We don't have to add the comments on each and every line. Okay, if my code is clear, it's a simple code, I don't have to add the comments, right? Again, comments should be added where it is needed to explain few of the things. Okay. For example, I think this is a good explanation for comments descriptions, right? Or I can give you one more example. Let's say this code. In my opinion, this is also a good comment because number one, on the top, it's telling me what is supposed to do, and then here 0.1, right? It's not clear if I look into here, right? Unless you go here and then start calculating the things. So it's basically telling you it's a 10% discount. So I'm just explaining a tricky logic here as well. So it's sort of a balanced documentation, right? But you don't have to write, okay, what this is doing and then what this is doing and what this is doing. So your code will become overcrowded and it basically then lose the readability of your program. So you have to make a balance between adding those details plus making sure your code is readable and is easy to understand. It should not look overcrowded. I hope that explain you the criticality and why we should add comments to our Java code, and especially it's very useful when you get into the actual programming world where you are writing a code for the real world applications. I think this is gonna be little helpful for you. All right. Once again, thanks for watching this tutorial. If you like these tutorials, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please share this channel. Once again, thanks for watching this tutorial.